Today was day 8 in Brian Walshe's trial, and it turned out to be the day that the Commonwealth rested at the end of the day. Now, if you had to ask me, I think that this was one of the most interesting days so far in Brian Walshe's trial, and perhaps that was by design why this was going to be the last part of testimony that the prosecution wanted to put out in front of the jury before they rest their case. So before we jump into the recap of what happened today in day 8, let me briefly remind you that I am still slated to play in this RCCS ice hockey tournament. As you can see, the jersey hanging in the back of my office, that was from last year's RCCS ice hockey tournament. We made it to the finals. We didn't win the finals. Hopefully this year we're going to take it all the way. But in the meantime, I still need to raise a certain amount of money. So if you have any desire at all to help a very, very special organization and charity that helps families that were stricken with cancer, that are struggling with the reality of their new life, well, this is an organization that helps them out. So if you can help out at all, the link is in the description. Any amount is appreciated and is going to go to a very, very special cause. So no super chats, no donations to myself. Just hit the link, and anything that you give is going to be very greatly appreciated. All right. So the first person on the stand today was Jem Mutlu. Jem Mutlu is a realtor, and initially they start off the day with some voir dire, seeing whether they're going to be able to talk about certain conversations or certain impressions that he had about the marriage of Brian Walshe and Anna Walshe. Eventually that actually did not come in, but it came in later with a different witness. But still, we're going to be hearing a lot from Jem Mutlu. So eventually Jem Mutlu did take the stand in front of the jury, and this is what he said. So initially he met Brian Walshe at a leadership program, where at this leadership program, it was encouraged to have a buddy or a partner system set up. And Brian Walshe actually approached him and asked him if he can be his partner, his buddy. And that's where he initially met Brian Walshe. Eventually he met Anna Walshe, was so impressed with Anna Walshe and became very close with Anna Walshe that he actually hired Anna Walshe to be his director of operations. And he hired her in 2020. And that's when Anna Walshe started working with him, and they became very close, both in a professional sense and in a friendly sense. Now, she stopped working for him in 2022, which is when she started to work for Tishman Speyer. So he was very hurt by it, but of course, he has to be supportive of Anna Walshe, but initially he was very hurt by it. Eventually he came around, and okay, they parted ways, but they still remained very close friends. Now, he even viewed the Walshe family as his own family. That's how close he was with the Walshe family. And he actually also sold properties and investments for the Walshe family, specifically also for Anna Walshe. He sold certain investment properties, and they had a conversation on December 29th where he was congratulating Anna Walshe on a recent sale of an investment property. And they discussed something called a 1031 exchange. Now, a 1031 exchange, very simply put, is that if you make a lot of money on a real estate deal and you just roll that money into a different real estate deal, then you will get saved from being taxed on all that profit. So they were talking about this 1031 exchange. He eventually opted to do it, and he was very excited by that, very happy by it, because then you can build a bigger portfolio. You can get saved from the tax consequences, and that's what they were talking about December 29th. Now, eventually, Anna Walshe also invited him to the New Year's Eve party, I guess you can call it, that they celebrated at home. Brian Walshe, Anna Walshe, and Jem Mutlu, because she understood and she knew that Jem Mutlu was just going to spend it at home by himself. So very nicely, she invited him over, and they had a very nice time together at this party. Now, during this December 29th conversation, Anna Walshe was talking to Jem Mutlu how traveling back and forth is really taking a toll, and it was difficult for her not to see the children. And also Brian Walshe can't leave Massachusetts. So all this was really weighing on her very much. And this is an important part for the prosecution, because the defense is going to be arguing the entire time that the relationship was wonderful between Brian Walshe and Anna Walshe, and they were in a loving relationship. And yeah, sure, they may have gotten into some disagreements like all couples do, but everything was actually just perfect between the two of them. And that we are starting to see today is actually not the story at all. Now, December 31st is when Anna Walshe invited him over. He came over on December 31st. She ran out without a coat. She was so excited to see him and gave him a big hug. He eventually invited him inside the house. And when he came inside, initially she was told that all the children are sleeping, and the Brian Walshe, of course, was home. So they socialized by the island. They were having a good time. Island in the kitchen, of course, that is. And the demeanor in the house was very happy, very festive, very jovial. Everything seemed to be great. Now, people can put aside certain feelings and certain emotions when they're having a good time, like a New Year's Eve party. So that's what probably the jury is thinking at this point. So at some point, the oldest Walshe child came out, gave Jem Mutlu a big hug, said he hasn't seen him in a long time. So you see that this is a very much more than a close friend, more of like a family member, and exactly how Jem Mutlu described it himself, that he really felt like family. Now, Anna Walshe took a photo that night of the New Year's Eve party, and she actually texted that photo to her boyfriend, William Fastow. So they drank some wine, they had some champagne, they all signed the champagne box. Each person, Brian Walshe, Anna Walshe, and Jem Mutlu, all wrote a little letter. In fact, Anna Walshe went a little bit even further and wrote, "Wow, 2022, what a year. And we are still here. Let's make 2023 the best one yet." She wrote a few other things, but that was the gist of what she was saying. So the oldest child that was home, Brian Walsh's oldest child, Brian and Anna Walsh's oldest child, gave Jem Mutlu a special necklace. I guess that was part of his gift that he was going to get for New Year's. And at the time, he was asked, how did Anna Walshe look? Did she look like she was sick? Did she look like she was suffering for anything? And he said no, he had no concerns at all about Anna Walshe's health. Of course, he's not a doctor, but just as a layperson looking at knowing how people react when they are not feeling well, Anna Walshe did not exhibit any of those symptoms. Now, during that night, there was some conversation between Brian Walshe and Jem Mutlu about how much each person is making in the household. And Brian Walshe said that he was making between $50,000 and $60,000 a year, while Anna Walshe was actually making that year in 2022. She made, with bonuses, close to $300,000 a year. So the big disparity about how much each person is bringing in terms of income. Now, he also said that he misplaced his phone that night. He specifically told that to Jem, and he said it actually was refreshing to be away from a phone. And by the way, it's encouraged. Good idea for all of you to just take a little bit, an hour or two, just away from phone, shut off social media. You can make sure to watch Brother Counsel either now or later, but you spend a little bit of a time away from your phone. It's always refreshing. And that's what Brian Walshe was saying. It's so refreshing to be away from his phone a little bit. Now, also, Brian Walshe told him at some point, normally he goes to bed between 9 and 9:30 because he has to get up early for the kids. And he left around 1 and 1:30. That's Jem Mutlu left the house around 1 and 1:30 in the morning. There was no mention at all about any sort of work emergency. As we know by this time, that was all just made up by Brian Walshe. I think everybody agrees about that. Now, he sent a text message the next day to Brian and Anna saying that he loves the necklace that he was given by the oldest Walshe child. And Brian Walshe eventually did text back saying Thomas just found his phone. Remember, he told him that he misplaced his phone before, and he said that Thomas just found his phone. Now, he spoke to Brian Walshe Wednesday morning, Brian Walshe asked him, have you heard from Anna Walshe, saying that Anna Walshe was missing because of this alleged work emergency? And he asked him back. He said, that doesn't make any sense. How can she just be missing? Did you have an argument or fight? To which Brian Walshe responded, did it look like we had an argument? You were there. So they spoke a few times since then, and that was the extent of the direct examination. Now, in cross-examination, he testified that Brian Walshe never had any issues with Anna Walshe being so close with him. Right? They were working very closely as director of operations, and also they had a very close relationship, a very close friendship, and Brian Walshe never had any issues with that. Now, the point of this is that the defense already brought this up, that saying that Brian Walshe was not a jealous person. He was okay. He understood that his wife was very attractive and that other people had crushes on her and maybe she had crushes on other people, but he was not the jealous type. And therefore trying to play down this whole idea that served as a motive, or what she was doing with William Fastow served as a motive for him to carry out this murder. So he brought that out on cross-examination. And also the fact that Brian said to him that he has to support her when she was leaving him to go work at Tishman Speyer, because initially he was very let down by this. He was very upset. And Brian was the one who told him, you got to be there for Anna Walshe. You got to be there and be supportive of this new development in her career. So this is great. You got to be there for her. You're such a good friend. You're like family. Fine. Now, Anna Walshe did confess at some point that she had some sort of crush on Jem Mutlu even. And it never bothered Brian Walshe. But he also was never told about this relationship with William Fastow. This is something also that the defense wants to keep showing, that this relationship with William Fastow was very quiet. And in fact, even Brian Walshe, their position is that he didn't even know about this affair. Now, they brought up the fact that one of his skills as a realtor is to be able to read people. Right? When you're a realtor, you got to know how to read people so that you can know how much can I push them, or how much do they want the house, how much do they not want the house, or whatever the deal is. And that's one of his skills. So being able to read the Walshes that night, they seemed all very happy that night. So that was what the defense wants to bring out. Everything was great and hunky-dory with this relationship, when really, according to the prosecution, it was really very, very strained, as we're going to hear about a little bit more in a moment. On redirect, now this is where they were really trying to get in the fact that Jem Mutlu was saying that he felt that this marriage was very strained, that there were some cracks in the relationship. However, because of his memory and because perhaps other questions were asked, he was not able to get in this testimony that there were cracks in the relationship, and it all had to do with whether Anna Walshe told him specifically that she was having a strain on her marriage, or whether there was cracks in the relationship. Did she actually say that to him? And even though you can argue that is hearsay, but to show her state of mind, he was not able to recollect that she specifically said those type of things. These were all just his impressions. So this was the whole argument before, and it seemed that he was just not able to get past this fact that he couldn't remember specifically that Anna Walshe said that the relationship was strained, or that there was some cracks in the relationship. So that did not come in through Jem Mutlu, but we're going to hear about that later. So then we heard from the U.S. probation officer, Marlene Ramdell, and she was the federal district court. There were some conditions on it based on his federal case. One of them was home confinement. Now, in order to leave the house, he had to send out a schedule and get it approved where he's allowed to go the following week. So normally he would send it out on Thursday, and then it would get approved by his probation officer. So where was he allowed to go? He was allowed to leave only for essential employment, so like employment, education, court, attorney visits, grocery shopping, banking, grooming, activities with the children. These are the type of things that were allowed, and he just had to give them notice about it. So he did not have permission to leave the state, as you can imagine. That much they were not going to allow him to do. So the point is, they went through some of the schedules about what was happening January 11th, 12th, 5th, and the 4th and the 3rd, just talking about the different errands the schedule that he was sending out to the probation officer. And obviously, some of the trips that he took were not the approved trips, obviously going to different dumpsters, things like that. So that was what they were bringing out with that. He didn't ask either to go to a specific restaurant on January 1st, 2023, or any restaurant. So that's something that would never be allowed when you're under house arrest. You cannot just go out to restaurants. And remember that Anna Walshe was talking to one of her friends, I think it was the nail salon, where she was very excited that Brian Walshe was going to take her to a restaurant, which seemed that was never in the plan. So exactly what was this all just a plan that he was concocting in order to carry out this murder? But anyway, so that was what she testified to. And on cross-examination, all just brought out was the fact that, well, it's not so easy to get permission to go to restaurants. You'd have to go through the court orders. You'd have to go through the court. It wouldn't be something the probation officer can allow or to grant you this permission. You'd have to go through the court system, very complicated, or it could be complicated. And maybe that's why he didn't want to do that, but maybe he really was planning on taking Anna Walshe to the restaurant. All right. Then we had some more surveillance, the Home Depot surveillance, where he was buying some more buckets and brooms. He bought a lot of buckets from Lowe's, and now he needs some more buckets from Home Depot. You can only use your imagination what all these buckets were for. He also bought 12 pounds of baking soda. So if you're going to be baking a lot of cookies, then you may need 12 pounds, or if you're using the baking soda for something else. All right. So then we had the property manager from Chapman West, some more surveillance about Brian Walshe going to the dumpsters. And then we also had TJ Maxx surveillance, where it seems like he was buying some clothing, some belt and pants. All right. Then we heard from Alyssa Kirby. Alyssa Kirby is very, very close friends with Anna Walshe. And this was the last witness. And again, perhaps by design, this is probably the last witness that they wanted the jury to walk away with this impression from Alyssa Kirby. So Alyssa Kirby, again, is close friends with Anna Walshe. She lives near her in D.C. And Anna Walshe told her about William Fastow, but only that she had a crush on him. She never told her about the extent of the relationship that Anna Walshe had with Fastow. She also told Alyssa Kirby that Brian Walshe knew that Anna Walshe had a crush on this William Fastow. And at one point she spoke to Brian Walshe on Christmas, and he was looking for Anna Walshe. She was very nervous because he hasn't heard from her. So she said, okay, no problem. I'm going to go check on the house. I live close by. I'll go check. And before she even got to leave the house, Brian Walshe texted her back, no, it's not necessary. She did respond to me, so everything's okay. Now, she did plan to get together with Anna Walshe December 29th, and they actually did get together. And they went to a bar, then they went to a karaoke dancing bar, and that's when they had a conversation December 29th. This is very important, this conversation. So again, this December 29th conversation that Anna Walshe was having with her very, very good friend, Alyssa Kirby, and she was saying how she was very, very upset. She was upset, number one, that Brian Walshe called her because they only didn't speak for like an hour and a half. And this also would show you that Brian Walshe was contacting her a lot. And this is what Anna Walshe said, that he was just constantly contacting her, not letting her breathe. And the relationship was very, very strained. Also, she talked to Alyssa Kirby about how the relationship of being so far away from the kids, what that was doing to her. And she's also very upset about the federal case that Brian Walshe was facing and was being delayed by Brian Walshe. Everything was just getting kicked down. The can was getting kicked down the road with that federal case. And she really didn't like that. She really wanted just to get this case over with so they can move on together as a family. And she also said, and this is where this evidence did come in, that the marriage was strained for a very long time. Okay, so this is the first witness that we're actually hearing. These are the words that Anna Walshe was telling her, that the marriage was very strained for a very long time, and she was at the breaking point. All right. So she said that Anna Walshe told her, Alyssa Kirby, that she wanted Brian Walshe to take responsibility for the federal case, do whatever he needed to do the jail time. So maybe it was going to be 1 year in federal prison, that for all she knew, just do it, accept responsibility, be accountable, and then we can move on together as a family. In the meantime, Anna Walshe set everything up in D.C. in her own name, without Brian Walsh's name, in case that was going to get in the way of anything. And that way the kids can move with her to D.C. Another interesting point that she brought out was the fact that Anna Walshe told her that she was not even intimate with Brian Walshe for over a year. So that also, again, suggests that this was a very, very strained relationship at this point. And because Brian Walshe was very depressed and his energy was being drained, and you can really feel how stressed this marriage was. She was exhausted from traveling all the time, and that he was calling her multiple times a day. Now, another part that she brought out was the fact that Brian Walshe was very close with his mother, and the mother of Brian Walshe went to a psychic, and the psychic told Brian's mother that using her psychic capabilities, she was able to determine that Anna Walshe was actually having an affair. Now, it happened to be untrue. So whether this is a legitimate psychic or not is up for grabs. But that's what the psychic told Brian Walsh's mom. And this is what Anna Walshe was telling Alyssa Kirby what Brian Walshe told her. So she said that made her very scared. She said that that Brian Walsh's mom never liked her, and she never wanted her in the picture. And since December 29th, since that time that they went out together, that obviously was the last time that Alyssa Kirby saw Anna Walshe. She left on the 30th and was planning to come back after the New Year's around January 3rd, January 4th. They communicated via text by the New Year's Eve party after midnight. And she then eventually got a text from Brian Walshe a few days later that he was looking for Anna Walshe, and they had conversations about that. Okay. Then she also finally had a conversation with Brian Walshe and Brian Walsh's mother at some point. So, we didn't hear much more about that. So that was the direct examination. On cross-examination, it was brought out that Anna Walshe had a very demanding schedule, work schedule, that is, at Tishman Speyer. And look, if you're getting paid that type of money, then you may be in high demand there, and you may have to work very, very hard. She also stressed the fact, again, this is on cross-examination, that Brian Walshe was told that she has a crush on Fastow, and Anna Walshe said to Alyssa Kirby that I told Brian that I have a crush on him, and Brian didn't care because we have a very open relationship. We share our feelings, and Brian Walshe was not even jealous, and in fact, she wanted him to be even more jealous. You know, if you're married to me and I'm telling you that I have a crush on somebody else, perhaps that should invoke some jealousy feelings inside of you, and perhaps you wanted Brian Walshe to be more jealous, and he just simply wasn't. And that was, again, the defense's point here, that Brian Walshe didn't care that much that his wife was having crushes on other men. And that's the extent of what they're going to say that Brian Walshe knew. They're going to say that Brian Walshe didn't know that she was actually having an affair. But yeah, she heard all the time that she has crushes on people and people had crushes on her. So this just didn't bother him. Also, the fact that Alyssa Kirby, no matter how close they are, she also stressed on cross-examination that she never knew about this affair with William Fastow. And one other fact that Anna Walshe told her is that she told Brian Walshe that we are all going to be here for you, even if it meant you going to jail. I mean, even if you go to jail, we will still be here as a family together, to show that maybe this relationship was not stressed and they still wanted to work as a family unit. Okay, so that was essentially what happened with Alyssa Kirby. Then there was a motion for a directed verdict or required findings, and this is where the defense attorney made a motion, Tipton, that look, there's no evidence of premeditation in this case. All the prosecution is showing is evidence of motive. But who says that that has anything to do with premeditation? The prosecution was able to rebut that, pointing to all the evidence that shows that there was some sort of plan here. And you can also look at some of the evidence that he did afterwards to show that there was a plan here. But they had definitely enough evidence in this case, not just to show motive, but also to show premeditation. And therefore, the motion was summarily denied. And therefore, we're going to be moving on with the Brian Walshe case tomorrow, with the trial tomorrow, starting with day 9. And we're going to see what type of witnesses the defense has in store for us. So join us right back here for 9:30 a.m. start on the Brian Walshe trial tomorrow, December 11th. We'll be streaming it, and we hope to see you all there. If you haven't yet, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. If you can, any amount is appreciated to donate in the link in the description. A very, very special organization, of course, that helps me reach my goal so that I can play ice hockey in this ice hockey tournament and hopefully take it all the way this year. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. We will see you all tomorrow.